Hello, and welcome to another Precision Flyer Repairs video. This one is about an American Flyer 2-rail S-Gauge 080 nickel plate road cab number 21145. Now, this one has a really interesting backstory, at least I hope you think so after I've explained it to you. But before I do all that, let me just say thank you for watching my videos. I really appreciate this. And if you would like, comment, subscribe. If you subscribe, please click the bell and the word all to be notified of future videos that I make and post. And if you wouldn't mind, share these with people that you think might also enjoy them. Thank you very much. One other thing too, of course, along the administrative lines is my shameless plug for if you're interested in more information about my American Flyer train repair services, please visit my website at precisionflyerrepairs.com, and you can email me at the email address shown on the screen, or from my website, just go to the contact page and fill out that form. It's very short and easy to do. Press send, and I'll get back to you. Thanks very much. Now, this one I actually have seen twice. This engine came to me from my customer, and he said, you know, I bought a 21145 and it's in need of a lot of attention, but I want it to look good and run like it ought to. So yes, I endeavored on a full overhaul. You know, the usual. What that means is everything's taken apart and cleaned. What's broken is repaired. What's worn out is replaced. What's missing is added. Everything gets reassembled as it ought to be, lubricated, tuned, and tested. And it turned out fine. It really ran great. But it had a couple of oddities about it. And I called them to the customer's attention, and he said, build it anyway. For now, I'll take it as it is. And as long as it runs well, then that's okay. Well, here's what was strange about it. He bought it thinking it was a 21145. I don't know what he paid for it, but I'd imagine probably a 21145 going price. And the locomotive is all 21145. The tender had a 21145 tender shell. Now, the 21145 was built in 1958. The tender chassis was that of a 1953 to 1954 343. How do you know? Well, because the drawbar on a chassis of that vintage or era or years, 53 to 54, was riveted to the sheet metal chassis of the tender and then connected to the locomotive where a bracket went widthwise across the cab. So in 53 and 54, the 343 had reverse and tender, so its drawbar was up pretty high as the sheet metal on the tender frame would be, and went across pretty high as that's where the bracket in the cab was mounted. So it had a 53, 54, 343 tender chassis, but inside it had a 346 air chime whistle assembly. And you go, well, wait a minute, the 21145 had a two-position reverse unit in the boiler, so that drawbar isn't going to work. Well, to compensate for that, a long Pacific type style with built-in trailing truck wheels drawbar had been installed, and that's how everything was compensated for. So 21145 throughout, although it had a reproduction curtain added to it because the original curtain on the two-position reverse unit was broken, so I put a reproduction on it, which are pretty nice. And then it had a 21145 tender shell, a 343 tender chassis, and a 346 air chime whistle inside. With some work on that drawbar, which didn't actually work, but I fabricated it or reshaped it in a way that did work, it all came out working fine. The engine performed beautifully, forward, reverse. Even the air chime whistle sounded off great. It could pull trains up and down the inclines, go through the twisty bits, no problem. And it was, a fully functional hybrid 21145. I guess you would call it a 211434546 to be accurate. So this customer said, I'd really like it to be an all 21145 someday. So on eBay, I saw a 343 for sale, and there was nothing 343 about it. It was 21145 throughout. The locomotive, the tender, everything. Only the cab on it was 343 numbered. And so this must have been a transition 343 at the factory where they weren't quite 21145 ready, but they had some parts of it and they didn't quite have all the 343 parts they needed. So they made a 21145 and put a 343 locomotive shell on it. Pretty fascinating. I thought he might get it for a good price because maybe not everybody would notice that, but yeah, plenty of people noticed that, and it went for a 21145 price, not a 343 price. So later on, a 21145 came up, and pretty rough, but it had what would be needed to make this one thoroughly 21145. The locomotive was rough, but that didn't matter. It did, however, render a very nice, I would say very good to excellent condition, original two-position reverse unit cab shroud. So that's now on this. This is all original now. And it had a pretty decent chassis with some rough wheel sets and so forth, and a bad plug board. But that didn't matter. None of that mattered because we were going to use the tender shell off this and only take the tender chassis, etc., off the parts donor. So this just went through a second round here at Precision Flyer Repairs. Nothing needed to be done electrically or mechanically to the locomotive, just cosmetically, and that was the original shroud from the parts donor 21145 to replace the reproduction. And then I serviced the tender trucks and wheel sets. I gave it new leads inside, and I gave it a new 2-prong 5-digit locomotive plug on the end of its lead wires, just because the one that was on it before was a little tired and somebody had done some soldering on them, which always makes them look a little messed up because it messes them up. But anyway, what a story to finally end up with, I think, a beautiful example. It did come through very well, and it runs fast, strong, smooth, and smoky with a nice choo-choo. It's a funny choo-choo. It's a little engine, and it's got a deep kind of choo-choo, almost like what you would expect a Hudson to sound like or something like that. But it sounds great, smokes really well, pulls terrific. And so I thought I'd share this with you. One thing interesting about the American Flyer production change from the 343 to the 346, besides the permutations of reverse units, 343 had a 4-position in the tender, and then they went to a reverse unit in boiler, and then the 346 came out, and it was equipped originally with the 4-position reverse unit, and then the 2-position reverse unit in the boiler, on and on and on. But under the tender, the 343 and 346 came equipped with pickup shoes, the lever type that go across the width of the tender truck with the spring and then the cotter or hairpin to hold it in place, which really adds to continuity and pickup positivity. The 21145 doesn't have pickups. It doesn't even have the posts to put the levers on. Some cost-cutting measures at the factory were starting to set in. 1958, the 5-digit models, they started doing things a little bit with cost savings in mind as compared to 46 through 57. But anyway, it still is a beautiful engine, a nice example of American Flyer quality and engineering. And I thought I'd give you the story on it. And in fact, if you want to see the guts of what used to be in the tender, if you will, guts, this is it. And here you can see the makeshift drawbar. This used to have a bump out in it, like where the built-in trailing truck wheel sets go. It's longer than a 343's would be because it has to reach under the reverse and boiler reverse unit on the 21145 locomotive. So I flattened that out, I cut it, I drilled the hole, and I rounded the tip so that it would go in the hole up ahead of the motor where the drawbar on a 21145 ought to go. But, and it did slope down a little bit in order to go from this connection point, which is where a 343's is, down to the mounting point of where a 21145 and a 346 and a reverse and boiler 343 would be. But a real 343 drawbar would be less long than all of this, at least at 53 through 54, which is what this is, because 53 to 54 had the rivet of the drawbar here. Now, in the later production, reverse and boiler 55 through 57 343s, there was a little bracket here, and then the drawbar went out across to be in front of the motor, because at that point they had the reverse and boiler instead of earlier with the reverse and tender. That's when it was mounted straight to the chassis with a rivet. And then here's the speaker. That's 346. So 346 tender, it would have had that little bracket off the front because 346s came with reverse and boilers, and they had to have that little bracket like the 21145s does. So this is definitely a 343 chassis. The rivet wouldn't be there if it was a 346. But the 346 air chime whistle has been added. And you might go, wait a minute, where's the resistor and the capacitor? Well, actually a 346 did not come with a resistor and the capacitor. It only came with a capacitor. And that capacitor was shot. It was all fuzzy and done its job. So that's a modern replacement capacitor that I installed the first time this engine was through the shop. And this unit worked fine. Now underneath, you'll see what I'm talking about. This is your 343, 346 wheel arrangement with a 293 Pacific style, I call them, full truck width pickup levers, and they're hairpins and they're conical springs underneath. This was fully serviced, of course, because the original 21145 that I sent back to the customer had all this, working and part of the engine. But then through the procurement by him of that parts donor, we were able to turn it now into this all original 21145. But I just thought I'd show you the 343 chassis with 346 air chime whistle assembly that used to be under the 21145 tender shell of this locomotive. Now, if that didn't put you to sleep, I don't know what will, but if you're an American Flyer enthusiast, I think you might get some value out of that dissertation. Some people have the hobby of genealogy. I think American Flyer train production has as many branches on the tree as many families do. To know these little subtleties and innuendos is fun, but it does take some study to know what you're looking at and what it is actually and when it was made and whether it should be there or not. But all that said and done, let's run this train and have some fun with a 1958, now all complete and completely original 21145 080. There she goes. The smoke will kick in. It's been sitting a long time. Might take a lap. You know how that is. But it's got a good little smoker on it. I may have to juice it a little to get that flowing the way it should. But by now, let's see. What have we got? Oh yeah, that's doing fine. That just took one lap. Not bad. Hear that choo-choo? That's pretty hardy for a little switcher. She originally went first through the shop, got all new, all original Pullmore wheels. I'd say she's fast, strong, smooth, and smoky. And I did say fast, didn't I? Yeah, she can get up and book. And when she does, of course, it smokes more. But even just at that 12 volts or so that she was running at, that was nice smoke production. And then reverses. The two-position reverse unit does work well. You have to be careful with those. Keep your tracks really clean. And since the 21145s do not have pickups on their tender, you got to keep your tender wheels clean too, or your engine can surprise you with a violent shift from going forward into reverse or reverse into forward if you're not careful. So there we have it. The 1958 American Flyer, all really 21145 080. Thanks again for watching and putting up with my backstory, but I like to share them when I can in case someone out there is interested. Until next time, be well and have fun running your trains.